This you? Writers.
Was poppin', was poppin', was poppin'. Welcome, Nicky and Moose. I'm Nicky. That's Moose. What's up, Moose?
What up, y'all?
And welcome to the live show. And I'm hearing everything in my ear, but that's cool. So, first and foremost, do me a favor. Share this with everybody you know, first and foremost. Like this so the algorithm could like us, because you like us. Then, the audio experience of episode 136 dropped today. Shout out to George White, the speaker. We went into everything as far as his content strategy, his background, him losing his football scholarship, which gave him the passion, what he has now, or at least a little bit of it. The business side of content and speaking, this whole nine. So go check that out. Moose, how did you feel about it? Because we missed you, but how did you feel about it?
I love it. I'm actually going to go and actually tune into the live experience tomorrow night and be an attendee, like, you know, one of the audience members and really soak it in. So, yeah, I'm excited for it. But no, his stuff is rich, man. I think you can always sense the difference in someone who's being really authentic and being true to self, and versus that which is an act, right? It's like that stuff don't really resonate. So I think the fact that it's resonating with so many people, it lets you know where it's coming from, which is dope.
That's a fact. So shout out to George. Moose, how are we feeling? How are you doing?
Man, yeah, things are good. Back in black, you know, for another week. It seems that that's to be that seems like the color that's working for the people. So if it's working for the people, we're gonna make it work and just expand the color of black in our closet. Not a turtleneck, but this is breathable material. Shout out to whoever gave me that term last time that we were here. So yeah, things are good, man. Thanks for asking.
Okay. I am Gucci. Came back from Mexico. Y'all saw last week I was there. This week I'm back home. And I only gained 1 pound. So I stayed true. Yeah. I stayed true to what I needed.
That's really good.
Yeah. They're not. I'm trying to get into fruits. Their selection wasn't hitting. But hey, we're here now. We're here, and only 1 pound, so we're good. But Moose, what are we talking about today?
Man, yeah, let's get into it. And for those of you tuned in, man, good evening to you all. Drop a 1 if you're feeling good. Drop a 2 if you're like on the fence. So hopefully gonna feel better after this. We take 1.5s and 1.25s and 1.75s and all that. So if you're somewhere in the middle, let us know about that, and that'll work too. And as Nick said, please do share this with a couple of people before we dive into it. We see your questions, by the way, and we'll definitely get to some of those towards the end. So if you got some questions, make sure you drop them in there, and we'll start getting to those towards the end. Now, here's the really cool thing, man. I wanted to talk about this because, you know, I don't know. I've been definitely in one of those modes. You know, we joke around and say sometimes it's be like deep for no reason, and today felt like one of those days where I was like, okay, I'm exploring some of these ideas that I've often accepted to be original, very solid principles. And I'm going back and saying, is that really true though? Like, I know that people have said this is the way to do a certain thing and this is the best way to do it, but is it really true? Does it still stand the test of time today? And I'm just exploring it. And so we want to talk about the cycle of a brand today. You know, there's something I mentioned actually on the episode when we did the breakdown about my whole story or whatnot. But one of the things I mentioned as far as like next steps was playing a bigger game and the importance of us to play a game that goes beyond just what will get us out of our immediate circumstance. And sometimes that's important. You need to do the thing that will get you into a better position so you can think and do what you got to do. But just in general, playing a bigger game. And then as I was thinking about it today, I said, well, for you to play a bigger game, it helps to know the rules of the game that you're in, because the more you know the rules, the better you're at winning. right? Like I think of that story of Kobe Bryant going to the extent of studying the rule book. Like he wanted to see what is the standard that the referees are using to call a game, and how can he use that to his advantage to really go and take it to another level. So with that being said, I think a lot of us, when it comes to especially the cycle of a brand, and we'll dive into the 4 phases. There are 4 phases in a cycle of a brand, but we'll dive into those here over the next, hour or so. But the main thing is, I don't think a lot of us are really clear on what those phases are and what to do in those phases. Now, the cool thing is, I feel that, watching you, Nix, and I love what Connie shared about you, man. Like, I don't know if you saw her post, but she was saying that you are in that season right now, and you stepped up and said, like, yo, I was one of the challenges in this area, so this is what I'm gonna do. And, have been, so I was like, oh, that's dope. We should definitely talk about that breakdown to help people to know, well, where are you? Where are you in this cycle? And what should you be doing to continue to prolong the lifeline of your brand? Because let's just be honest, the more that a brand lives on, the better it is for your business and for your family and for your legacy and for all of those things. So let's get into it. I'll intro the first part of it, and then we can dive into it. So for those of you who are like asking, well, what the heck is the first phase of it then? You mentioned 4 phases. What's phase 1? And maybe we could get somebody to take notes with us live in the chat. That'll be cool too. But phase 1 is the development phase. All right. This is it's like, think of it like the idea phase. This is the phase where I have this thing that I'm passionate about, that I really enjoy, that I'm really good at, that I think can be something for people to be a part of, or it's something that I can put out into the marketplace that people can be included in or can exchange with, whatever it is. So that's an important phase in every business cycle, and definitely in a brand phase. But there's a good amount of people who also only live in development phase. Like that's the only thing that they do. They just live in idea phase and never make it out of that. So I guess I just wanted to ask Nick, like, talk about the importance of ideas and the importance of putting an end to the idea phase. Like, yo, okay, ideas are important. Like ideas make people super rich, but at some point, idea phase has to end. So break that down for a little bit from your perspective on the idea phase or the development phase.
So the idea part, and I believe the idea goes along with strategy as well, right? So the first part, I think people would definitely connect with a lot is the strategy side. Once you get an idea, then what? Then you got to strategize how to make this work, right? Because a lot of people need a plan or should move with a plan before the execution phase, right? So when we get the idea, how do we break it down into some things that are tangible? So whether it is a product idea, a service idea, content idea, event, whatever, how are you planning this out? What is the vision of it? Who is needed or what is needed? What kind of resources are needed? Who is it for? Target audience, right? Target market. How are you going to make this come to life? What are some of the first stages? You may not know all of the stages, but what are some of the first stages to keep it, like, to bring it to life? So that idea / strategy phase is very important to stay right there. I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable, because really good ideas are meant to feel a little bit uncomfortable when executing it. But getting in that place where you feel good enough that you can actually execute on it, whether it is you have the full-blown strategy or just enough to be like, okay, we could go ahead with that situation. So I think once that is there, then you get into the execution phase of what do I do with this idea? Because a lot of people stay in that idea strategy phase, but you have to trigger it at a certain point. Okay, I have this. Now let's go to step 2.
I love the maturity in the answer, because I remember a time in my life where I would be infatuated with the idea that I had an idea. Like I would just be
Yeah.
like, yo, I got this idea. And I would be so amazed at the fact that I thought of something, that's all I would think about. It's just the idea itself. But what you did was you added something very important to that. You added numbers, data, resources. Like it was almost a full evaluation of, okay, hey, ideas are good, but remember that the idea cannot transform into a business without having some fundamental elements added into it that you're taking into consideration and evaluating. So literally we're in a process now where we were talking about creating a space to record content from, almost like a community center for content creation or being able to record the podcast. Like I know at some point, as comfortable as this setup is, it's not sustainable, right? At some point, I'm going to have to move. I'm going to have to leave. Something's got to change. So I said, all right, let me start looking into that, having a dedicated workspace for content creation, and that can be shared with other people as well. But as the minute I started to go from just the space that I use to a space that others can also utilize, I never thought about this, but I said, I wonder how many people in the area search for podcast recording studios or content creation studios or any studio in general where they know that they can go and film and record. And so it was a matter of gathering facts or data to the idea phase to know, okay, does this really have a lifeline? Because we talked about it in the beginning. The idea is to play a winning game. And so your idea, it doesn't mean that if it can't come to life right now, it doesn't mean that it's a bad idea or that you're a terrible person or whatever the case may be. But it's just that you want to push through the ideas that are most sustainable and can give you life. Because if something takes, say, 3 to 5 years to get it off the ground, and at the end of the day, it's not the one that is really going to be a progressive idea for you, then you just spent 3 to 5 years entertaining a hobby. And again, nothing against entertaining hobbies, but if you have to choose between really keeping the lights on and making progress in your day-to-day or getting to that next level in your career, but you are dedicating or contributing most of your efforts to a hobby, well, that's a challenge, you know? And again, especially if your goal is to say, no, I want to make this kind of money or I want to be a part of this kind of thing. That's a big piece there. So I love that we're adding that layer to it early and saying, hey, idea, yes, data as well, though, very important. And make sure your idea phase comes to an end, because at some point you got to push it forward. I had this question and I texted you about it today, where I said, do you invest in yourself or do you invest in a brand? And that was, and I feel this is a good place to talk about it, because part of building something, I think in the beginning, it's making sure that you're the right person to build it. You might have a great idea, but if you're not the right person to build it, I don't want to say it's a waste of idea, but it definitely causes you to say, all right, reevaluate for a moment. So one of the things that, as I was saying, it's often said is, hey, you have to reinvest back in your business. You have to reinvest. You have to put profits back into your business. It's so important to work as much as possible, live as lean as possible. And all the profits you make, you eat Cheerios for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then all the money is put back in your business. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, is that really true though? Like, is the point of having a brand or a business or something that's making money is to pump all of the money back into it? And again, this is where this concept of the phases became really important, because I said, at some point, I think all of the money should be going back into you. Like I would think in the idea phase or even before that, it's important to reinvest your money back into you to make you better, so that you can sustain and carry the idea out. So I just wanted your take on that, man. Like, is there a cycle for money back into the brand versus money back into you, similar to the brand life cycle? Or how have you treated that conversation around, yeah, no, I'm gonna have to, I gotta do this for me right now? Or it's like, oh, nah, I can't. I'm gonna eat the Cheerios, back into the brand we go, and we're going to keep it moving.
I think if you're not right, then your brand's not right. So whether that is from a knowledge base, then you need to level up, whether it's from a spiritual base, mental base, physical, your brand is nothing if you're not good. So there has to be a balance of you are investing in yourself and you're investing in your brand. I do believe first and foremost, you come first. Because I think once you take care of you, you are going to find the resources to invest in your brand somehow, some way, right? Mm-hmm. You may get the knowledge to know, shout out to Terry, that can get you, credit and capital to then fund your brand. But if you didn't get that knowledge and you just went full blown, let me reinvest in your brand, like you can only maybe reach a certain amount, or it may slow you down because you don't have necessarily the capital that you want to do what you want to do. So I do believe that there is a balance, but if I had to pick one before the other, it would always be invest in yourself. So everything else can run smoothly. It started with you. The ideas started with you. The strategies started with you, maybe help with others, but started with you. So the rest of the stuff has to be maintained by you based off how you invest in yourself.
Yeah, and that's so good. You see, like once in a while, go get Chipotle. You don't have to eat Cheerios all the time. It's like a nice little balance. Not always Cheerios. You got to invest into yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, a little balance. Chick-fil-A, something. I don't know. No, I'm joking. But it is a serious conversation, though. I think everyone should think about that because we're trained to do it that way. And at some point, I want to be able to talk about managing cash as part of like the business and brand development. Just the overall development as a whole. Cash management is important because there are people who make a lot of money, or even what doesn't seem like a grand scheme of revenue. But if you manage that cash properly, you can make a tremendous difference in your life and even in your brand in a matter of a year. You'll be surprised at how little money it takes, if managed properly, can make a huge difference. But that's a conversation for a whole nother day. Let's get into phase 2, man, which is the introduction phase or the introduction stage. And now it's, okay, I have taken the idea, I've overlooked the data, I've evaluated the resources, I have now recognized where my opportunity or how I'm going to build around this concept. And now I need to introduce it to the marketplace to start building some awareness. Now, Nix, I think obviously a very important and critical role is probably when the idea of branding is most important, because you're trying to help build that connection with people and say, when you see me, think of this. Mm-hmm. What tips do you have for that introduction phase of launching something new, bringing a new initiative, and almost trying to erase? I don't know if you do this. I guess that's another question, but I don't know if you want to erase what people thought about you prior to this new idea when you introduce something new, or how does that work? But talk about the introduction phase of this thing now that you're bringing to the market.
Clarity is the big key to all of this. Like when you're launching, when you are introducing something new, whether a brand, whether an idea, whatever it is, clarity is super crucial, because this is the first, second, third impression of you, right? And what you have. Now, as far as erasing or keeping, if you put out very clear messages, the rest will drown out. So I always think about it like when somebody from, let's say from a personal brand standpoint, from somebody who got in trouble, right? Did something wrong, or got canceled, however you want to go about it. The work that they do afterwards, the clarity of, I want you guys to know me more for this than that, is where that comes into play. And that's more of a, clearing out the fire, right? You could do preventive maintenance early, where you are making sure that people are just knowing this idea, this launch, this brand just for this. And you have to be very clear with what is the messaging that's coming out, what is the content that's coming out, what are the emails, what is the website, what the landing page, everything to that point. Is it clear to what your vision and your mission is? And so if that's not clear, if you're like, bump it, we're just going to put it out and we'll fix it along the way, this is where a lot of brand confusion comes in when it comes to our ideas. It's like, okay, I know I have to do a mastermind. Boom, I'm going to do a mastermind. But then down the line, you're realizing, oh, snap, I attracted the wrong people. Oh, snap, they expected something of this, and I really meant to do this. So clarity is super crucial when introducing, launching, going into execution mode. That part needs to be very crystal clear. Oh, why can't I hear you?
Sorry, I muted myself there. So I love that. And I was gonna say, by the way, the beautiful thing about what you're saying is that the introduction is done through content. You don't have to pay anyone to introduce you. You can create your own content, and maybe you can expand on that. Like that's the whole opportunity. If you haven't listened to episode 135, where we talk about content creators being the next big earners in this whole cycle that we've seen from the internet to companies to platforms, like that whole almost domino effect, content creators are the ones. And so you can introduce your own idea, your own brand, your own concept, simply by turning the camera on, simply by using some of the tools that's around you. By the way, you can learn more about this by joining the Deeper Than the Brand community. The number one content branding community pretty much globally in the world. It's kind of a big deal. You guys should check it out. Nix, how can they, anyway.
Deeperthanthebrand.com. Deeperthanthebrand.com.
Hello. Very, very, very important. Very important. So yeah, introduction, man, it's critical. And again, don't assume that because your name is at the top of your Instagram bio or your profile, then people automatically know. Or it's like, no, of course they know what I do. Like we went to high school together. They have no clue. And you'll be surprised that, and I don't want to say this in a mean way about how shallow or superficial people are. I'm not saying that in a mean way, but I'm just saying there's so much things that are happening in everyone's day-to-day life, and they don't pick up on the specific details that you think that they're getting by you putting out like those small, subtle messages. Like, hey, you see me drawing? You saw me like pick up the pen and put a slash on the paper. I'm an artist. Like, how could you not know that? It's like, no, you have to communicate that a little bit more clearly and consistently. And that's why I think like what you're saying, clarity is very important. And again, I'm saying utilize content for that. Obviously, that's important. Let's talk about the next phase, man. Phase 3, for those of you following along and take notes, phase 3. So phase 1 was the idea phase or the development phase. Phase 2 was introducing that idea or that concept, that brand that you've now established, introducing it to the market, letting them know, hey, I'm here, okay? Say hello to me, say what's up, I'm here. But then the third phase is the growth phase. It's now saying, I've taken this thing that I have slowly built and established and introduced, but now I'm ready to scale this thing. Now I'm ready to really make a movement out of it. It goes from an idea to a movement where people are rallying behind it. What's your take on that, Nix, when you say, how do you know when you're ready for growth? Like, how do you know you're ready to, all right, I got something, it's time to grow this thing?
I think when you're tapped out, right? And
break that down.
So as far as resources, like you've hit a ceiling from whether it's a sales situation, whether it is a following situation, a subscriber, some type of conversion, there is a ceiling you hit when there's not any type of ceiling when it comes to our brand. But you're hitting something, you're stuck. So it's probably 9 out of 10 times you need to get to a next level of scale. So this is where either you're investing in yourself, investing in your brand, you're getting coaching, you're getting certain software that could help you scale, CRMs, email marketing, whether it is hiring new people. Maybe you need an editor, maybe you need a salesperson, maybe you have to look at what is the ceiling that you're hitting, because in different ways, in different seasons, we hit different ceilings. So our social media presence may be hitting a ceiling. Our revenue may be hitting a ceiling. Our brand awareness is hitting a ceiling. So you have to just identify those things, and those parts you are ready to scale. I would say at least have an understanding before you hit that part. And I think you could speak better to that, what are some of the signs of it. But I'm an extremist. It's either go or you're stuck.
Or stop.
So, right. Yeah. You go or you're stuck. But Moose is great for telling some of the yellow flags. You know what I mean? To kind of pay attention to when it's time to scale.
Yeah, well, what's so cool about what you're saying, and I've never thought about this way. You're saying see stuck as an opportunity rather than a bad sign. Like, right. Think about how many, like, you definitely expand on that, because I've always saw stuck as, oh shoot, like this is dangerous. I've always translated it as a bad sign because you're not making progress. But you're saying no, stuck is an opportunity to scale. I've never heard anyone say that.
Yeah,
you might tweet that. That's fire. Yes.
Go ahead. So you can only get yourself so far, right? Your team that you have right now, whether it is contractors, whether it's people you actually have on the team, or just we good, hello, love you, we're doing this together. You can only get so far with them. Now, that doesn't mean it's not working. That just means you're possibly tapped out as much as you can doing it in the way that you've been doing it. Now it's a matter of adding a new layer. And this is how I see it, of like, this is an opportunity to try something else that we didn't even think of, because we all are used to our own perspectives and what we think is success, what we think is winning, that whole nine. Like, some of us will think of, well, it's not a ceiling, we're consistent. This is consistent numbers, right? This is consistent growth. This is but really, if you added this thing, that thing, and whatever the thing is, like I said, there's different scenarios to where you may be hitting a ceiling. But if you added a new resource, a new software, a new person, just a new perspective, a new look into things, you could possibly get over that hump that you're at. I don't believe anything is just like, when you are stuck, it's an L. Like, that's it. Unless it's been that way forever. You feel me?
Yeah.
But sometimes we get very, we're stuck. Is this it? We're shifting to something else. There has to be certain patterns that show, okay, this is not working anymore. I continuously try and get, I tried new things. I've added these things. Still nothing. God help. Okay, let's take a different route. Because you know me, I don't say, let's let it die. But let's take a different route and see how that goes. But everything how I look at it from my lens is more of an opportunity than, okay. And even it may be an opportunity to shift the direction completely. That's fine too. But you've gotten yourself this far. Don't think of it as a failure because it gets stuck. Yeah. You've done amazing. Now it's time to get the help.
Yeah, I'm starting to think maybe it's also a sign that the marketplace is ready for the next thing from you. I didn't really connect it that way before you said what you said there about stuck as an opportunity to scale. That's crazy. I've never saw it that way because typically the way I've translated stuck in just any business that I'm a part of, I look at it similar to what you said, a yellow flag or a warning sign that something is broken and it needs fixing. Now, of course, in an ideal world, you want to catch those signs as early as possible and make your adjustments so that you never hit a complete standstill, because that's when everyone panics. So if you're expecting to make a certain amount of money, and again, I always look at revenue in a business as a scoreboard. It's a benchmark. It's a performance indicator for how you're doing, right? And those numbers you can find in other places. You can look at the engagement on some of your content. That's a performance indicator for what's happening. So if you're seeing certain numbers increasing, well, you're on an upward trajectory. People are liking, they are engaging, they're sharing, they're commenting, they're doing all of those things that let you know, hey, I'm in tune with you, or I'm really into what you're doing. But then if you start to see a downward slope and maybe there isn't as much engagement or people are unfollowing. Now, I know in some cases it means nothing at all. It means that, hey, you're doing a better job at getting more clear. You're going back to almost that introduction phase where you're reintroducing a more clear message around what your brand and your product represent. And some of the people who don't really rock with that or didn't engage with you for that reason, they're just signing off. And if that's a change that you're making for the long term, then by all means, it is what it is. I always credit Nix to say that she's great at being able to constantly test things. And for someone like myself who typically resists change because I like the consistency of building something that's sustainable, you miss out one key ingredient from those types of business models or brands in general, and that is innovation. And so the new big thing that I'm on now is, can you force yourself as someone who doesn't like change? Can you force yourself or challenge yourself or motivate yourself to jump in and innovate something that's working and say, how can we make it better? How can we add an element to it to make it more complete? And that's ultimately what I say is the growth phase. It's you now looking at your brand and saying, how can I create a closed loop cycle? How can I create something that is complete from A to Z, even if it's in one category? So, one of my favorite brands or companies worldwide, of course, is Apple. And when I look at Apple, I think about, okay, how can I create my version of the iPhone, but also the Apple phone case, as well as the screensaver or the screen protector? How can I just do that? With my original idea, maybe my idea only was this concept of a t-shirt line. Okay, well, how can you expand to be not just a t-shirt line, but have other things or things that complete the concept altogether? So that's my version of growth as well. Like I think of it that way. So yeah, from a warning sign standpoint, definitely look at metrics. You got to have something that you can measure. Anytime you're flying blind and you're not tracking some level of data or numbers or something to show you what's happening, you're always based off of, or you're only left to do one thing, and that's to assume. And you know what they say about people who assume? We're going to keep it clean because I don't curse, and that's just is what it is. And you're also like relying on your emotions. And I could tell you that emotions are fleeting. They always change. They cycle and regulate in the body based on what you eat and the temperature and the weather and all of these external circumstances. But it's missing the key ingredient of what really helps something to grow and scale, and that's consistency. And so numbers is the best way to treat your brand as black and white as possible. And by the way, in some cases, you break that rule. Like, I know, Nix, you in some scenarios, you've completely broken the rule around the numbers, and in positive ways too, right? Like, oh, you can make money doing this. Yeah, no, but it breaks the relationship with the community. I'm not going to do it. You can break that rule, but it also helps to have that benchmark there and just see how the performance is going. So you can have an instant pulse check. But if you don't measure, you don't know until it's too late. Like you never find out until it's like, oh, dang, I should have done this 6 months ago.
It's good. It's good to keep a pulse on numbers, not to like scoreboard watch, like, yo, I'm doing amazing or anything. But it's just more on some like, you understand patterns. Like I understand that we're going to have some ups and we're going to have some downs. Now, when we go up, I'm not going to get too excited. I celebrate small wins, but I'm not going to be like, this is the new norm, because I know there's going to be a down period. Now I got to pay attention to how long we're going to be up, how long the growth is, how long the revenue is, I got to understand that, but I got to understand the low and where is the new average, whether it's from YouTube revenue, which that is a whole annoying situation in itself, right? Whether it is the Instagram algorithm and understanding how that works, whether it is from people reaching out as far as gigs, sponsorships, that whole nine, merch, and shout out to those people who are getting the merch, the I Am a Creator shirt, but just neither here nor there, just slight plug, link is pinned, but that's not the point. But it fluctuates. And so understanding the data is going to allow you to know your numbers. And when it's down for a very long time, that's when I really start paying attention to maybe we have to make a shift. Not that it's, oh my God, it's not working. Oh my, like this is horrible. From a social media standpoint, instantly when IG's reach goes down, it's like, oh my God, Instagram sucks, blah, blah, blah. I never think that way. It's like, okay, it's a season. Can you still stay consistent or switch up some things so that when it does start acting right again, boom, everybody has seasons. So the data is important, just like how you were pointing out, of just understanding patterns.
What's the first thing you do when you start to notice something is not working like it used to? Like, do you ever do a compare and contrast of, okay, what was working? Like, I was just thinking about this today, and I was saying to myself, like, for example, I noticed that the quote reels, there was a time when like putting a tweet on a reel and with a drone footage and music, whatever, like that was the it. And I'm starting to see that slow down. And so I was literally just thinking to myself, and by the way, this thought process is transferable into other areas of this specific part of the growth phase or phase 3 of what we're talking about, the brand life cycle, because it actually segues perfectly into the next part that we're going to talk about. But I was thinking to myself and I was saying, do I go back and try to study the elements that made people engage with the ones that they did like? Because nothing changed within me. Like, I'm still the same person. I'm still speaking about relatively the same things or the same ideas and same concepts. And so do you go back and study? You try to break down like the elements of what made these pieces work? Like, what do you do when something starts to decline?
I do go to the ones that worked and try to understand why. But I do also understand that I'm trying to cater to two things. So in the sense of content of what you're speaking on, I'm playing the platform game and I'm playing the audience game, right? So maybe with the example that you use as far as the quotes in reels and having a background that's maybe a video was once working. Now that they put emphasis on photos again, carousels are back. So you don't necessarily need to do the reels with the quotes or the pictures anymore, because they're putting emphasis on photos again, right? So you could do a single photo, you can do a carousel, and those could possibly do as good or even better to what was happening before. So there's platform changes that we have to be aware of. But also, from an audience standpoint. Maybe our audience is growing to wanting to see more from us. That was cool for a season. I like it, but it goes also, are you growing your following? And if you're not, then your audience may be fatigued from that particular style and they want to see more from you. If you are growing, then you could possibly keep that because it does bring in people. If it does bring in people, keep that for that brand awareness thing. But then you have to understand another way to nurture to your audience. So there is things that, especially when it comes to social media, we have to put those two factors into play. But with all the things that I mentioned, to see what's the strategy of, do I stay that way or do I change things up?
Yeah, that's a great thought process, man. That's a great thought process. Yeah, like, and I love the context that you're adding to each of those things, right? It's like, yeah, it could be the audience, but take into consideration, are you growing or have you been stagnant from a following standpoint? Because each of those, as it relates to the audience, is also different. So that's key, y'all. I hope you all are really, making light of all of that's being shared there. Let's talk about this fourth phase. For some, it could be like a bad breakup, or like, oh man, this is a sad time. But I also think a lot of people don't recognize that this is a part of the brand life cycle, and it could bring a lot of maybe peace. I don't want to say closure. Closure sounds more like a relational term, but it could bring a lot of peace and maybe even alleviate pressure of, oh my God, what if I fail? Because if you knew this was going to be dealt at some point, maybe you don't have to worry about preparing for it or avoiding it because maybe it's inevitable, right? So that can change things up a little bit. But ultimately, the final phase of this, and it's a little bit of a cycle, but what it is you start to mature. People get used to you and they're like, okay, cool. Like I could expect the same thing from you all the time. And maybe I outgrew it or I don't really need it anymore. But eventually there comes a decline, which is really a dip in the growth that you've been experiencing for a period of time or for a length of time. And things start to slow down now from a revenue standpoint, from a numbers standpoint, from an engagement standpoint. You're starting to see that shift. Now, this is a very important part to play because you, by studying this and taking inventory of the different phases that you were in, you can avoid this and really weather this storm as much as possible, but you can also learn from it. And so let's talk about that final phase, because I was first introduced even to the idea of, some brands die, right? By you. Like you would have, I remember us having that conversation like, maybe it's time for that brand or that thing to die.
Right.
And it goes away. And it's like, nah, but what you mean? I thought it has to live on forever. And it's like, but why? There's a lot of businesses, and we've seen big businesses close. Like I remember Modell's used to be the craziest, most important store when it comes to sporting goods and whatever. And it's like, where's Modell's today? So there's a lot of stores that have gone completely out of business. And that's the same thing, is that the cycle for that particular brand or business has just ended. And it's easier to bring closure, cut your losses, and go on to the next thing. So let's talk about that a little bit. And then let's also talk about the transition of being able to extend that lifeline by making a certain pivot or making some certain moves.
So I do agree. And yeah, I was the one that brought it up as far as the brand or the idea has to die, right? And it's more on the situation of it has to die so something else can be born, right? Or finally flourish. So I don't necessarily look at it. Now there's some, like you said, like we'll talk about Blockbuster. You feel me? Like talk about Kodak, where you may be creating a brand, or if we're talking about content too, you may be writing on something that is working right now. So everybody's doing this particular market or this particular style, and you don't know how to stay relevant. You don't know how to shift into what is the new trend, what is the new market, or like if we talk about from a Kodak standpoint, where they couldn't even understand or transform into digital. They stayed on the physical boy, where, you know, if they switched, last time I heard about Kodak on a serious was for nothing with photos. So Blockbuster's another thing. They didn't go to where late fees wasn't a situation. They didn't go into the digital streaming situation. So some brands are going to die because they don't reinvent themselves over and over again. From a content standpoint, your brand might die because you don't know how to reinvent yourself. You are stuck on doing just these quotes. You are stuck on doing this one type of video, and there's no true growth. And at some point you're going to quit. So there's that part. But then there are some things to where the foundation of what was created is shifting to stay relevant. And you have the means to stay relevant and stay within the times to where the foundation is now dead and you have a brand new foundation. So what we knew of this particular brand, this particular content style, this situation is no longer, because you're doing it in this way. You may fall under the same market, right? May follow the same niche, but what we know of it is different. I was watching, and I sent it to Isaiah, where it was talking about the evolution of content, right? So where we had the Gary Vee style to now we have the Alex Hormozy style with the bold captions and some GIFs that pop up. And they're saying the next stage is highly produced content where we're now seeing you talk, but then it's masked and you have a whole brand new background or things that are popping up. You have these highly produced graphics. And so we're seeing more of those types explainer videos coming through instead of the typical captions and everything, because everybody's doing it. And so what is going to be the new thing? That doesn't mean content's dead.
That's right.
Or the people who have capitalized on doing videos that way are dead. But if you do not keep up with the times and you're still doing that old style from before, you're not relevant. Your services will die. Now, you can transform it to, okay, I'm not, for example, everybody's talking about, from my end, social media agencies, to where that's not going to be a situation. It's going to be AI agencies, knowing how to implement AI into different businesses. And the social media part is one of it, but it's not just going to be the main part. So those who evolve with how the times are going, the foundation changes. But if you are not aware of that, your brand could absolutely die. Your content, your idea can absolutely be irrelevant because you are not staying up with it.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah, I was literally thinking, AI is one of those concepts. Like, you see a lot of new things that come up. And again, that's one of the big lessons that I had to learn. My nature, and some of you who are listening or watching, you might resonate with the idea of, have you been an early adopter of anything? Have you been the first one in your friend group, in your family, in your community, amongst your peers or a specific demographic? Have you ever been the first one to just go all in on something and start telling other people about it? Whether you like it or dislike it, but have you ever been the first one? And when I took inventory, I realized I was not one of those people. So you have to eventually, especially when it comes to business, because this is where I say, when you're so emotionally attached to your own business and your own idea, you don't see the mistakes that you're making because you're blinded by your emotions. You're so emotionally attached to it, you'll never call yourself out as to being the reason that something is failing or not going the right way. But the minute you start to look at it that way, and you see that, oh man, I'm constantly being someone who's just late to the party. Like, it's like you arriving to the party when everyone had so much fun, they're already out. It's like, oh, it was a great party, you just came late. It's not that this thing didn't work, you just arrived too late. You already missed that train, kind of thing. So early adoption of new trends, technologies is very important when you talk about being able to extend the lifeline of your brand. There was a period on here when I was talking about, hey, how can you partner with the next generation so that even if age was a factor for your specific service, product, demographic, or whatever it is, even if age was a factor, can you partner with the next demographic or the next generation of leaders and start working some collaborations with them so that you can be introduced to a newer audience and extend that lifeline? That's exactly what we were saying there. It's about maintaining that growth phase for as long as possible so that you don't go into a maturity. It's literally a slope. Like, growth is an upward tick, maturity is a slight curve, and then the decline is just down. Now, you have some time, depending on how great you were, you have some time before you get to the bottom. And that's where you start making some moves. And so we talked about Usher last week on the live, who was talking about, hey, I just want to introduce my music to the next generation of people who probably don't know R&B, don't know about the Confessions album that did tens of millions of sales in the early 2000s. And those people were, infants at the time. It doesn't work. And so those are some of the things where, when you talk about working and extending the current stage or brand that you're a part of now, that's one of those things. But also, don't forget that in some cases, and I don't know how people feel about it, but in some cases you do got to cut your losses. Like, I hate to be the one to say, like, oh, I'm sorry, but you do have to cut the losses and just take the lessons from that and build the next thing with everything that you learned. Just don't stay out of the game. I will say that. Don't say, man, I lost, I can't do it. No, take the lessons and jump back in and try and rebuild, having gained the information and everything that you got through there. So that's important.
That's a fact. We got some questions.
Yeah.
Let's do NYCDR. He's been asking a few. Did either one of you ever experience imposter syndrome at the beginning? Was that the live before? I don't know where we talked about this. We talked about this in one of the lives.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, we talked about it. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Check 2 weeks ago. There's a live that talks all. I think the title is called Imposter Syndrome. So, yeah, go check that out. Sam, because I know this is Sam, constantly testing things out to determine where you are. How would you look at Moose constantly testing things out?
Well, that's where the numbers come into play. I don't know that you test to see where you are, but you track your numbers to see the effectiveness of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So if you have a baseline, and you can always look at it like 3 layers, right? You have a baseline, which is the average of what you can always expect. Now, let's just use content for a matter, and then we'll even use business. So you could say, okay, I'm tracking my 90-day average, and I've noticed that most of the posts that I create, they get about 25 likes. That's a baseline for you. You're seeing that after you add up all the posts that you made, all the likes that you got, and you divide it by the number of posts, that's a baseline. It's about 25 likes. Okay, cool. Well, what's a peak? Like, what's something that I know is really overperforming? Well, heck, anything over a 20% increase and above. So if you start to see 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 likes, you're like, wait a second, that is an overperformer. This one actually outdid my natural average. And then there's some that are below average. If your average is 25 and you get like 7, you got to say, okay, hold on, what happened here? And if you're consistently tracking just the averages and the numbers, you'll know what do people want to see more of as it relates to content. What is something that is not working as effective? Like I said, that's how I noticed as it relates to my Twitter reels or whatever, let's just call them quote reels, I was like, oh, okay, I'm starting to see a decline in that. It's not really as effective as it once was. So I have to make an adjustment, and I'm already starting to think about it. But I only know because I'm looking at the metrics, and I'm not so much attached to the creation or the thing that I'm creating, because it's coming from the same space or the same source. I still feel the same way about it. I'm still doing it with the same intention. I'm still trying to produce the same outcome. So rather than being, say, harsh on myself and saying, oh, you suck as a creator, or you don't know what you're talking about, it's like, no. It's just something is shifting and I have to make an adjustment. And then, of course, the same thing applies in business when you're looking at, you could look at new customers, you could look at conversion rates, you could look at revenue, you could look at profit margin. Those are all different factors in a business that you can constantly evaluate and measure and know if something happens beyond what you know is your average, then that calls for, okay, let me take another look. So for example, like the Small Business Administration, or SBA, they put out a stat that said most businesses should spend about 5 to 10% of their money on marketing. And so if I know that 5 to 10% is a benchmark or a place that I should operate within, and then one quarter or 1 month, I see my marketing expense was 35%. Even if you're not someone who's super into details, you should be able to see that number and say, whoa, what happened here? And so, you know how many times I've done something like that and found that I was charged twice for something, or someone wrongfully billed me for something, and you end up saving a ton of money because you're like, yo, this doesn't make sense. This is outside of the norm. So that's where, I've seen it from a business standpoint really make a difference.
That's good. That's very, very good. Got this one where it says, how do you grow your following when your content doesn't get reach? You concentrate on your content getting reach before you concentrate getting a following. Your content is your lifeline for your social media presence. So if that's not working, you can't really grow a following off of it. So you have to pretty much diagnose why you're not getting any kind of reach. Is it, the audience isn't feeling it no more? Are you utilizing an old feature that they're not putting any type of energy towards? Can it be just a slight shift on certain things? So I would look more into the content than necessarily worrying about the following. And then this is good for you. Well, shouldn't we as entrepreneurs have an exit strategy?
Well, that really is applicable for certain companies that are easy to sell. The good thing about, so for example, in our space, let's just call it the info space or the education market, online education market, more companies are getting to a point of becoming sellable, if that's a word, meaning that they're getting to a point where you can actually sell it. Big exits were you had that startup idea and you're building, hoping to get the attention of a big corporation that will buy you out for millions or hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. And then boom, you could skate off to the, La La Land, like the founders of Instagram, for example, WhatsApp, all these people, they are no longer running the companies today, but they came up with the idea and sold it. So that traditionally is what we saw as the companies that were built around an exit strategy. Today, with brands per se, because if your brand and by the way, this is always a great lesson and something you have to think about during your idea phase. If your brand is built around your face, your personality, your name, your likeness being attached to it, you can't really sell that because you're always a part of it. Now, you can sell pieces of it, you could bring partners in, but you can't exit you. That was one of the things that, we've always talked about, like when you name your product after you, you got to be prepared to be married to that thing for life. There's no switch out unless you then rebrand, rename, etc. So that's just a slight variation there to that conversation around selling and having an exit strategy. Like, yeah, it's good, but you gotta go into it with that intention.
That's a fact. That's why we've toyed around with changing the name of the podcast. And we're still toying around. We're just not sold on it. We may need your help. We'll talk about it another day. No real stress to it now. But shout out to everybody who watched to this point. We appreciate you. Love you. Get the shirt. CreatePressure.com. I am a creator. Okay? Get the shirt. Listen to the audio experience, of course. First and foremost, listen to the audio experience. That interview was fire. It was something that we could all relate to because George is not like out of here yet. So there's certain steps that we can still relate to. There's certain steps that we may have missed and we can go back and it doesn't seem too far out. So definitely listen to episode 136 with George White, the speaker. The video comes out every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. The after show drops Wednesdays on Apple Podcasts as well. And a slight plug, Creator Av, y'all been definitely tuning in. We've been seeing the downloads. You guys are loving it. And we appreciate you. But if you haven't heard about Creator Av, it's on our podcast channel, audio only. And it's actually the replays to some of these lives. Okay, the best 20 to 25 minutes of these lives are going to be pushed to Creator Av. So for those people who are like, yo, I missed something. This is an hour long. Oh my God. Don't worry. We got the meat and potatoes of it at Creator Av. Drops every Friday, 6 a.m. Go check that out. Moose, I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
Yeah. No, great conversation. Very good information. I'm not just saying that. That was, you guys might need to go back and listen to this one a couple of times, for real.
This is a really, really, really good one. Shout out to Sam/Thomas. He got the shirt. Okay, so get the shirt.
Hey.
But we're out, people. We love you. We appreciate you. Go tell everybody about Nicky and Moose. Okay, still one of the most slept on podcasts / channels out in these streets. So go check that out. But until then, we appreciate you. We love you. And you know what we're gonna say.
Peace, y'all.